Well, howdy, friends. This is Matthew Sewell, and you are listening to episode 118 of the Popecast, a history of the papacy, the only podcast about popes where you'll find non boring stories on the successors of St. Peter, and a reminder that all of the world's problems have happened plenty of times before. Not some of the world's problems, not a few of the world's problems. All of the world's problems are nothing new, in case you're new here. But anyways, this week on the show, we've got a great guest joining us, Mr. Jonathan Liedl from the National Catholic Register. He's the managing editor over there, but he also recently produced and released a 1-hour documentary on Pope Leo XIV called Pope Leo's Peru that's free to watch on YouTube. It's linked in the description below. I just recently watched it myself before we recorded. It had been on my list for a long time, so this is a great excuse to finally go and sit down and watch it. I was moved to tears several times. It should be no surprise to anybody who's been listening, especially recently, that we have a great love for Pope Leo in our family. My oldest name is Leo. Pope Leo XIV took a picture with a couple of their pictures, but this just kind of drives it home that our Pope is such a great gift to us, and as is always the case, is exactly the person that we need at the time we need in our state in humanity. So this episode's coming out a couple days before his landmark first encyclical, and also his encyclical on artificial intelligence, the use of technology in our age. So I think there will be some interesting implications, providential timing that this is coming out, that I chatted with Jonathan before the release of that, because it just puts a great frame, I think, on the kind of man that Pope Leo is. It obviously emphasizes a large portion of his priesthood that he spent in Peru. I think half of his priesthood he spent serving the people of Peru in 3 different dioceses. So we go through all of that. Some great stories, some great anecdotes. Jonathan shares kind of some behind the scenes info, kind of some inspirations for what was on the show. So I won't take up any more of your time. The only little boilerplate things, as always, if you're watching this on YouTube, please hit the subscription button and the notification bell so you get notified whenever we release new content. Also, if you want to support the show, make sure you get our newsletter, make sure you get announcements about new episodes. You can do that at popes.substack.com. Today in Papal History is the newsletter. You can obviously subscribe for free, but we appreciate any monetary gift, any sort of subscription. And if you subscribe and pick one of the tiers to support the show with a monetary gift, you get one of the mugs that Pope Leo has. So I can't say whether he uses it every day or not. I like to think so. But at any rate, you can get one of the very same mugs that the Pope has. So without further ado, we'll get into our episode today. So here is our chat with Jonathan Liedl. Enjoy. Well, welcome back to the Popecast. Our guest this week is the managing editor of the National Catholic Register, Mr. Jonathan Liedl, joining us from South Bend, Indiana. I think you're the first guest we've had from South Bend, so congratulations.
No way.
Thanks for coming on the show.
I'm honored. I hope I represent South Bend well,
Yeah, well, the little that we chatted before, I have no doubts at any rate. But the reason I was interested to chat with you, as we talked about before, is you just you kind of created and produced and released a whole hour-long documentary, special report for EWTN called Pope Leo's Peru, not Leo in Peru. There's the other documentary that was Leo in Chicago.
Yes, that Vatican News has done that. And EWTN, we have our own. We've got some more things coming on some of that front too. But yeah, Pope Leo's Peru was this one for sure.
Yeah, well, I had a chance to watch it. Finally, it's been on my list for a really long time since I first saw you release it. Obviously, we've talked about Pope Leo a lot on the show the last few months, and he's a amazing figure. So many great stories that have come out of it. So this documentary was no exception. But I want to get into the documentary, obviously, in great detail. But we'll start with your background. So I know that you're newly the managing editor of the Register. And also newly a dad. So, I mean, as much as you'd like to share on either or both of those fronts. But yeah, who is Jonathan Liedl, just for the listeners and viewers out there?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a dad. I'm a husband, married to Jacqueline and the father of Adelaide, who is 8 weeks old today. That's super exciting. It rocks your world in a good way, being a first time father. But yeah, obviously, you know, the Register, National Catholic Register of print journalism, part of EWTN, and that produced this documentary, which is obviously TV for EWTN. But I'd really say, like, kind of at the core of my work, has, kind of looking over my career, has just been kind of a desire to communicate about the church, about the faith, about Christ, about how to apply the church's teaching to various contexts, whether it's our personal moral life, whether it's the social teaching in the public arena. So that's kind of been a thread throughout. So I've some highlights along the way. I worked for the Bishops' Conference in the state of Minnesota for a couple years, which was I was the comms guy, so a great opportunity to take the church's social teaching, take what's going on in Minnesota, connect the two, and communicate about it. I also went to seminary. I was in seminary for 3 years from age 28 to 31. Great time of discernment and prayer, of course. And that's really also, I think, where I fell in love with theology. It was funny because I was in pre-theology actually. So for 2 of those years taking philosophy classes. And, I'm like this 28-year-old guy taking philosophy classes with like 19-year-olds. And it was just so funny because I was like freed in a way to kind of care more about learning than I had been when I was a 19-year-old. And I was like, I need to get the A, I need to get the grade, right? Seminary is a great gift in that way, philosophy and then theology. Yeah, and when I left seminary, it was 2020, so in COVID, I was interested in some higher ed kind of stuff, Catholic formation kind of stuff, but I think given the circumstances at the time, that kind of thing wasn't happening a ton. And I'd done some previous journalism work with EWTN and the Register, and so that was just kind of a natural fit. And so, yeah, I really, when like the question of what is a Catholic journalist, like there are different debates about that, and some people think of it, well, it's really just a journalist like anyone else. You cover the Catholic Church, as you would, town hall or something like that. But I think it's got to be different. I think we have to look at the church, right? The church is the body of Christ. Certainly there are politics involved in the church, but the church is a corporeal but a spiritual reality. And I think we have to bring that to bear when we're covering what's happening in the life of the church, explaining it to other people. And certainly when we go out into the world and cover what's happening in society, in politics, just keeping the truth of the incarnation and human dignity in mind. That's kind of, yeah, well, kind of the thread. And then, yeah, I've been with the Register now since I left seminary in 2020, and have stepped into this managing editor role. So doing less writing, but I think more story assigning, more just trying to help extend that Catholic view, like looking at the world with Catholic LASIK. I did a grad degree Catholic studies at the University of St. Thomas in Minnesota in my mid-20s, and their tagline was Catholic LASIK, right? Just like
Really? Oh.
looking at,
Hmm.
everything from gardening to basketball to the stock market, anything and everything, like from this Catholic perspective. And so just trying to bring that to bear in our coverage of the church in the world.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It seems like what I've known from reading the National Catholic Register and then blogging off and on for them. I didn't realize the last time that I'd written for them was 2019. I thought it was way more recent than that. But
The
COVID was,
time warp of
yeah,
COVID,
I was gonna
right?
say COVID was a time
Yeah.
warp. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it seems like it dovetails nicely into what their goal for writing and presenting the truths of the church and wrestling with different things. So yeah, so that's really good to hear, and I think it's a nice segue into the topic for the day. So yeah, the documentary, again, outstanding. It's free on YouTube to watch, about an hour long. Talk about the genesis. Obviously, Pope Leo being elected was the genesis of the idea, but maybe more specifically, what led to going on location, going all over Peru like you did, and the places that he served. Just talk about the process that led to its creation, very first.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first moment, May 8th, 2025, the man known formerly as Cardinal Robert Prevost steps out on the loggia at St. Peter's Basilica as Pope Leo XIV. The first place I didn't go wasn't Peru, it was Chicago, right? I'm in South Bend. So
Yeah.
the next day I hopped in the car and just drove the hour and a half to the south side of Chicago, pretty nearby. I just saw the house he grew up in, like this little Cape Cod, like less than 1,000 square feet. The neighborhood, the Riverside area of South Chicago, the south side of Chicago, and I mean, it's really, yeah. So just giving you like an experience of who this guy was. I mean, he's a contemporary of ours in some setting, a few generations above, a couple generations, but he's from America, right? And then so this desire to know who our new pope is, right? Like know what has shaped him, the experience he's had, the people he's met, the types of ministry that he's engaged in, like how that shaped him. To answer that question, yes, you need to go to Chicago. Yes, you need to go to Rome, but you really do need to go to Peru. And this was really clear, right? Like how the documentary opens up. The documentary opens up with his election on May 8th. And yes, we have this American Pope, and clearly his upbringing here, went to college at Villanova, had all ministry assignments across the Midwest. But in his opening remarks, opening address, right, as the new pontiff, he speaks in Italian, he says some prayers in Latin, but he goes out of his way. And I learned in the course of this documentary, this is spontaneous. It was not
Oh,
planned.
wow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He addresses the people of Chiclayo, Peru, where he'd been bishop, in Spanish, right? A very personal message to them, thanking them for their faith, for accompanying him as a bishop and really helping him become the man who he is today. Yeah, we knew we needed to go to Peru. And it's interesting, the genesis of this, I think it originally started as the filming we did in October of 2025. We waited to release it until the 1 year anniversary. But kind of leading up to that summer, there was like discussion of, okay, Jonathan, we want to send you to Peru kind of for like a print journalism trip. You'll go down there, you'll interview some people, ask some questions, try to figure out how this place impacted our Pope, how it might shape his ministry ahead. Then as we get closer to October, it's like, hey, what if we send a camera guy along with you? You're going to be interviewing these people. Might as well record it on camera, and then we can use that. We're part of the EWTN network. And so I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. And then as we get closer and closer, it's like, well, wait a minute. What if this was a little bit more of a feature, right? Like, what if, we're kind of telling a story, like there's a whole video package put together. And it really I think initially it was not going to be an hour-long feature, but I came back from, 9 days on the ground there with all of this footage, all these people we'd interviewed, but also some scenes kind of capturing and illustrating what life in ministry is like in Peru. And we just decided we need to go big, right? We go a whole hour-long documentary, which I think, again, is appropriate given how, I think, formative Pope Leo's 19 years between 3 different assignments were in Peru. So that's kind of the genesis of it. And yeah, there's, a lot of, as I mentioned to you before, I'm definitely a print guy, right? Like I like the written word. I have a bit of experience from TV before, but this was also an exercise for me in, telling the story in a different way, like using images. I mean, film, video can communicate things that the written word can't, especially the heart in a unique way, emotion, impact. And so trying to bring that to bear in the course of filming and editing as well.
Yeah, that's great. It's really interesting to hear how those things sort of take shape because, and I think it's a credit to your journalistic instinct, I guess, maybe for lack of a better term, to see it and say this is not just a print story. We have to show it because you don't. One, for some reason, subconsciously in my head, I thought Peru was in Central America. I completely forgot it was in South America, and that it was so huge. Everybody
Yeah,
thinks Argentina, Brazil are enormous and everything else is tiny. But one that it's so large, that it's so geographically diverse, that you have
yeah.
city centers and then ultra poor mountain towns, hot, ultra winter, the whole gamut.
Desert, jungle. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
right.
the whole
Yeah.
gamut, which is interesting for one. I didn't realize that he was in 3 different places. That it seemed like the place that he spent 10 years, 11 years were just as impactful for the people as the 1 year that he spent as a priest. Like you kept going back. Was it the girl who was her godfather? Was she from that
Yeah.
that original?
Mildred.
Yeah,
Yeah.
named
Yeah.
after his mom.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
her dad, I was really struck. He
Yes.
had tears in his eyes the
Yes.
whole time he was talking about him. And that was 30 years ago, 20 years
Yeah,
ago.
I mean, that was 1985 to 1986. This is in Chulucanas, where Pope Leo is a 30-year-old missionary priest, was there for 1 year. And you're right. I mean, Hector Camacho was the head of the altar boys at that time. He's got to be, so he was like a teenager at the time. And I'm not good at math, but that's 40 years ago, right? Like I think,
Right. Yeah.
and
Oh yeah,
I mean,
that's right. The altar servers. Yeah.
yeah, and he was just so moved in the moment thinking about the impact that this American missionary had on them all those decades ago. And of course they maintained their relationship going forward, but I think it was, this gringo, right? A lot of people use the word gringo, or
Right.
norte americano, like someone from, it's kind of a different world up here than down there. But they're like, the fact that this first he was a priest, which, you're used to maybe a distance between priests and the people. And he's also the gringo coming to Latin America, coming to not just Latin America, not just Peru, but Chulucanas in Piura, which is a poor campesino, like a country, very rural part of the country. And but nonetheless, he was so close to the people, right? He was so close, even to these altar boys, right? Like in terms of his interest and care in their lives, the ongoing formation and support he provided, even after he left Chulucanas, and it makes that impact. And you're right, Hector, when we interviewed him, I mean, he was crying for it. And sometimes, we chose to dub it because our audience is, English speakers in America. And sometimes if you're just reading subtitles for a whole hour, there's a disconnect. But if you can hear it, we did our best to make sure parts of the Spanish got in there, but like the emotion, right, that every word is laden with, I think really comes through. And it just really underscored again that this personal impact that the Pope had, not only there, but kind of throughout his journey in Peru.
Hmm. The mention of Chiclayo, I want to go back to really quick because speaking of welling up, I think I had tears in my eyes watching that because I remember obviously watching that. My oldest
Mhm.
name is Leo, so I kind of like blacked out. I think when when he said,
Yeah.
"Oh my
Yeah. You're like,
gosh,
we got, yes.
the
I
Pope's name
knew
is
this was
Leo."
going to happen. That's why I named you Leo however many
Right,
years ago.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like you're listening, you're processing that he's American, and then he's speaking in a foreign language. So I don't know that it quite registered that it was. I knew it was Italian and then Latin and then Spanish, but I didn't really appreciate what he was saying. So it was interesting to watch that again in full 1 year later, knowing
Mm.
that he had spent so much time in Chiclayo, was their bishop, was kind of a unique case because he wasn't there. He was a, canon lawyer, like kind of an odd choice, even though he had been there for a long time, an American becoming the bishop in Peru.
Yeah.
I even remember, I think, did the pillar exist in 2014? I must have read it maybe in CNA or something when he got assigned there and thinking that's kind of strange that an American got made the bishop. And then when he got plucked as a cardinal and all these things.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it was so incredibly powerful how you guys spliced it together to show him mentioning that. Specifically, the line that got me was, "Who showed what was it? You can probably remember better than I could. Who showed this bishop how
Yeah.
to love his people or something like that." It was very
Yeah,
beautiful.
faithful people who like accompanied their bishop and shared with him their faith or something like
Yes,
that, right?
yeah,
Like, yes, it wasn't just like, oh, to my people who like I served them and I sort of like honed my administrative skills in being your bishop, but it was like, no, I gained something from you. And that's a theme that we didn't like make a big deal during the documentary and say, look at this theme every step along the way, but like looking at it now, I mean, in Chulucanas, the poor, the poverty of the people, the humbleness of the people shaped our Pope, right? And later on, like he was shaped as much in this experience as he did the shaping of his people, which I think is real. And that was kind of the question that we, as I was down there and thinking, because you gotta find like a through line to kind of connect the dots, right, and tell this story. And it was not just how did Pope Leo impact people here, but how did they impact him? And it was interesting because we would ask people this question, and maybe it was my Spanish was not good, which it's not perfect, but it's it's okay enough to do an interview. But I had help from a field producer, my camera guy, when this question wouldn't get through. But it was like asking them, how did Peru shape the Pope? Sometimes people hadn't really thought about that,
Mm.
right? Like, but when they did, they had great answers. And at the beginning of the documentary, there's like a little montage where on the street I'm asking some people, do you think of Pope Leo as an American or a Peruvian? And this one woman, let's hope I get the Spanish right, is a religious sister. She said, más peruano, more Peruvian, uh, porque él es más peruano que la papa,
Oh,
which
then a
sound
potato.
than the potato. He's more Peruvian than the potato, which I guess is something Pope Leo himself has said before. But it's a great kind of double meaning because Papa, depending on whether it's capitalized or not, either means potato or Pope. I guess it's La Papa is potato, El Papa is the Pope. But so there was a real sense from people these 19 years in country that he really kind of talk about smelling like the sheep. Like this is a Pope who really sort of took on the devotions, the character of his people in so many ways.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really beautiful. It's um, the way that you describe just kind of just letting the story tell itself without any sort of agenda is what it reminded me of is how sad it is that the Pope, like people try to pigeonhole the Pope or so many media outlets, secular
Yeah.
or otherwise. I can think of a character who considers himself Catholic, but very clearly has sort of an agenda to pigeonhole the Pope into some. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. But
There's so many of them,
maybe
so I
yeah,
don't.
that's right.
I,
Yeah, but where it's just such a poverty uh of storytelling because there's such a greater story to be told. Like it doesn't matter what the Pope believes politically. It doesn't matter what ultimately how he interacts with the secular world in those areas because there's such a more beautiful story to be told about how he's affecting the hearts of the people he's serving and vice versa. So many people miss that because the real richness is in the types of stories that you were sharing from the people that he knew there.
yeah, I mean, I think if you come into it as like, I've got a goal, like to use this figure to advance something. You're going to objectify the person in front of you, right? And so, like, yeah, we were trying to genuinely learn about Pope Leo, his time there, how it shaped him, how it's impacted him, and I think it's yeah, I mean, I learned so much. I learned a lot. And I think the most gratifying thing for me too is seeing how that kind of storytelling. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we had like a question we were asking, how did this place shape Pope Leo, right? But weren't presuming the answer. But how that portrayal, and like we've talked about just a little bit ago, like the impact this pastor had on the people, uh, and not just in like, oh, he made me feel good, but as Hector Camacho was saying, like, he was so full of Christ. And it astounded us that someone so young could be so full of Christ, right? As another altar boy said, we all wanted to be priests because of his witness, because of his impact in Chulucanas for that 1 year. And like, so the gratifying thing to me has been to be able to share. I'm a big John Henry Newman fan. Newman has like this line about persons influence us, voices melt us, deeds inflame us, something like that. It's really the communication person to person is really ultimately how Christ, the truth, the beauty, the goodness of Christ is communicated. Yes, you can read about it in a book, right? And that's all notional knowledge. It's all true. But until it's sort of incarnated and presented to us in a person, it doesn't have the same impact. And I think a friend shared with me, he saw on a message board of a blog, was talking about SSPX, right? And kind of sort of the situation they're in right now and where they might be headed, potentially, formal schism. And there was a comment in that blog saying something like, you know, this is just where SSPX is going is a line I can't cross, right? And like, yeah, I have my concerns about the church, this and the other thing, but Pope Leo, I think God is going to use him. I mean, he's our Pope, is going to use him um, in his leadership of the church. And the person said, that this documentary, Pope Leo's Peru, like
Really?
helped them see a side of him that sort of cut through all of the like agenda setting, right? And like,
Hmm.
oh, Pope Leo's a liberal, no, he's a conservative, whatever. And it's like, he might, whatever, he might have views on, which favorite translation of Augustine's Confessions does he think is best, or, how should we apply this church's social teaching in this area and that area. But like, I think what the documentary hopefully conveyed is this is a man who loves Jesus Christ. That's what prompted him to spend almost 20 years of his life in Peru. And that's what so many people on the ground remember about him. And that's the impact that he had on them, and that he, carries forward now as Pope of the Church.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting you mentioned the SSPX because another maybe all these sorts of stories tend to maybe make us think, oh, he's very tenderhearted guy, and then you're tempted to believe, oh, he's just a squish who can or a pushover or something like that. But you very clearly showed one of my favorite memes. I haven't seen anybody else using it, but I think it's underused. Is him with his hands straight out gesturing at the church.
Yeah.
I think it's prime for lots of uses, but that situation wasn't it. You can remind me. It was basically a schismatic group who was having mass illegally.
Yeah,
Or
so
illicitly.
this was in 2018. There's a shrine in Ciudad Aten, which is in the Diocese of Chiclayo, and there, is a purported Eucharistic miracle that happened there, I believe, in the 1700s. So a very important place for Catholics in Peru and the devotional life there in Chiclayo. And in this case, there are some challenges, not just in that diocese, but in a lot of Peru, especially in the more rural places, of people presenting themselves as priests who aren't priests, right? They might be Anglican. They might have been Catholic priests before, but were laicized for different reasons. And so in this case, in 2018, there was basically not a valid priest, or not like a recognized for ministry priest, celebrating mass in this shrine, and he had a big following, right? So he was like drawing people around him, drawing them out of communion with the bishop and the Diocese of Chiclayo. And so Pope Leo, as the Bishop Prevost, he went there to kind of shut that down. He went there to say, like, this is an unauthorized use of a Catholic shrine. And you're right, like, I love that clip, right? And so we were using archival footage that EWTN Noticias, our sister agency in Peru and Latin America, had from that time. And I mean, he was so emphatic, right? He's there, he's listening, right? But he's confronting this mob, maybe that's too strong, but this group of people. And, he's listening, but at a certain point, he says, Hermanos y hermanas, brothers and sisters, I am the bishop of this diocese, and I am responsible. I don't want to try the Spanish, I'm not going to get it right, but like, I have a responsibility por el culto católico, like for Catholic worship in this diocese. Like, that is, and that to me, I think is beautiful, because it helps us put Pope Leo's very real capacity and disposition towards listening. It puts it in context. It's not simply a listening for no reason, or listening like, because everyone, every opinion is equal or something like that. It's a listening because, again, going back to that heart to heart kind of thing, which Augustine, of course, himself lived out, and Pope Leo is an Augustinian. You listen to encounter the other, right? Like to form a real relationship with them. And at the same time, though, there are things that we know are true. There are responsibilities. There are hard red lines. And in that case, there was one there that he was not going to allow this Catholic shrine to be sort of abused in this way by having, invalid, or at the very least illicit liturgies celebrated there. And he was willing to stand up for it. And I think that is one of these things that I keep in my mind when I think of how he's going to lead the church nowadays, with all the, SSPX you mentioned on the other end of the spectrum, German Synodal Way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think we do have a pope who is principled. I think the term we used in the documentary that I used to kind of capture my sense of his leadership style is principled patience, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is someone who is going to listen, is not necessarily going to rush in and come down with the hammer, but there are real principles in play, and it is for the sake of coming together so we can journey to the truth, right? There are a couple other, Father Jorge Millan, who was the former
Right.
rector of the cathedral in Chiclayo. I hope I'm not jumping to
No,
other,
by
but
all means.
he he was the rector. Pope Leo made him the rector of the cathedral during his time as bishop, and he was also, the head of like marriage and family life stuff in the Diocese of Chiclayo. He also lived in the same rectory near the cathedral of Pope Leo, so he knows him very well. And his interpretation, really, of what Pope Leo, how he led in Chiclayo, and what he'll be doing um, in Rome was really interesting. First of all, we talked about this scenario in Chiclayo that Pope Leo inherited when he became bishop, 2014 into 15, where basically there were these groups of married clergy
Right. I
who
remember, yeah, the story in the
who
documentary.
there's some details that we're continuing to look into and understand more, but the gist of it is basically that there were priests who were cohabitating. I believe the canonical term is concubinage, right? Like
Right. Yeah.
they were living with women, in many cases had sired children, but they were not married, right? Because they're priests. And, I think previously they had been dealt with in different ways, laicized, excommunicated, things like that, but they were still continuing to present themselves as priests, right? They were still drawing a following, collections taken up, receiving that money. Now, so Pope Leo inherits that situation as the Bishop of Chiclayo. And what we learned is that, a lot of these former priests, or whatever we want to call them, are like, listen, we gave our lives, we forwent careers, we were in seminary, we served as priests for however long. Yeah, we get that we broke our vows and whatnot, but we're not going to give this up because this is our only source of income, right? And then you had, other people who were like, no, like you violated your vows. What you're doing is scandalous. You need to be cut off completely. We're not talking to you anymore. Leo's approach, or Bishop Prevost, I guess I should say, because he wasn't the Pope at the time, but his approach was to come in and say, okay, let me hear what you guys are saying. Oh, so like the concern seems to be that you need a source of income, right, to provide for your family. I'm not going to give you money. And, but what I can do is reach out in the community and look around. Oh, you've got a philosophy degree. Maybe you'd be a good high school teacher, right? And he helped facilitate them finding employment, right? So that then they could stop presenting themselves as priests. And so Father Jorge Millan, he said that example, Pope Leo doesn't just come in to condemn, but little by little things are worked out. He's always been this way. That was Father Jorge
Hmm.
Millan's quote that stuck with me. Little by little things are worked out, that he's always been this way. And so, Father Jorge went on to say, Pope Francis opened the doors wide to everyone. Todos, todos, todos. Come in, come in, come in, right? And everyone comes in and sit down. And now what Leo will do, this was his Father Jorge's sort of interpretation, is going to help explain to people, this is the gospel, but this thing here, this is not from Christ, right?
Hmm.
And you're in the church now, but we all need to come together, right, around the faith, right, around the teachings of Christ, which is something he said on his recent papal press conference coming back from Africa in response to the German synodal same-sex marriage or
Yeah.
blessing, whatever kind of thing, right? Like unity around the teaching of Christ. And so exactly to your point, like, yeah, it's not squishiness. It's not listening simply for the sake of listening, but it's listening to truly encounter and diagnose what needs to be done to move towards unity, move towards healing, move towards truth. That's the impression I got. So patient, or what do we call it? Principled patience. I think
Principled
that
patience.
encapsulates that.
I'm reminded of something. I'm sure it was 10, 12 years ago now. I think it was Father Mike Spitz told a story about some mission trip when he was explaining what meekness was.
Hmm.
And he's on this trip with this like big giant dude who was just super soft spoken, didn't really say much, and was super nice. And I think Father Mike said he was in college and he was an idiot and he was like bugging people. And the guy at one point just like got up and picked him up and carried him out of the room. And so he said that's meekness because you have the strength, but you know when to use it. And so you mentioned the
Mm.
hammer. The hammer is
Hmm.
there, and Pope
Hmm.
Leo, I'm sure, is not desirous about using the hammer, but when it needs to be done, he has the fortitude to do it. He's just going to try every other possible option and yeah, be faithful to, or be fair to both the person he's involved with and the truth at the same time as best as he can. Yeah, I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, no, that's and I think I mean, it'd be premature to we're barely a year into the pontificate. So what I did want to do with the documentary is just say like, well, you're wondering what Pope Leo is going to do in Rome? Well, he did this in Peru. So therefore this is exactly, but but it gives us a sense of the man of who he is, right? And these personality traits he has, the leadership style he has, and we can kind of see, we can at least look now, right, with these two examples we talked about, SSPX and these unauthorized ordinations, episcopal consecrations that are slated for July 1st, the red line that he through Cardinal Fernandez in the DDF has drawn, and then we'll see with the German situation, like, yeah, will a similar red line be drawn? We know he has the capacity to, but it just helps kind of, I think for me at least, give some context to looking at how he might be going about addressing some of this stuff.
Yeah, I would agree. Kind of an instruction manual. So you've already covered some that are. I mean, it's chock full of great, beautiful, moving stories. But I'm curious, what are some other stories that really struck you through the whole experience? So the ones that come to mind for me, one that I had already heard in other places, that he just kind of exudes this goodness about him, the simple love for the Lord, kind of an otherworldly gentleness, but again, not in a squishy pushover kind of way. I met some friends, a Lutheran pastor and his wife that I had on the show a few weeks ago, who have known him since 1980 when they were in
Oh
hospital
wow.
chaplaincy together.
Yeah, you mentioned, I saw that article, right? Because that was in Minnesota, wasn't it? Where he Okay, so yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so he did the clinical pastoral education. The two of them did that together before each of them were ordained. And they said even then, at 23, 25, something like that, they said, how is this 25-year-old guy this
Yeah.
locked in on
Yeah.
with the Lord? I think they even told a story about one weekend. I think they went to a Benedictine monastery. He was already in formation for the Augustinians, but they went and visited this monastery and had a chance to go through the chapel and all these things. And they said he was really chatty on the way there and not so much on the way back. Like there was something that he was just kind of
Mm,
processing.
yeah.
I feel like, as a side note, that's one of those stories that 100 years from now or 200 years from now, they'd be like, yeah, he was, the Lord told him that in 45 years, he's going to be elected the Pope
Yeah.
or something, which, I mean,
Yeah. Well,
maybe it was. He'll put it in a diary and we won't find it
or
for.
in his home parish, St. Mary's of the Assumption in Southside Chicago, when I was there, it's a dilapidated, it's falling apart and all this other stuff now. But like there's a stained glass window in the back that is the keys of Peter and St. Peter's Basilica. And you just think like he was an altar, like, did he ever look at that? Or in what way did that shape, his understanding of the role he's playing right now, the ministry, the office he has right now. Yeah, anyway, who knows? But yeah, maybe it was then when he was visiting. I bet it was like St. John's Abbey up in Collegeville or something like that in
Maybe.
Minnesota.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah. I mean, but you're right. Like a total like, and I think that's really like his Augustinian form. I mean, part of it is probably like who he is fundamentally, just the gifts that God gave him and the way he made him. But it's learning more about the Augustinians. There really is this sense of being like seeking God in all things. And of course, Augustine, his famous line, I was without and you were within. So there is this contemplation, prayer, and study, listening to God speaking to you in your interior life, but then also in community, right? With other people. Which was, I can share some stories, like if you want me to launch into the favorite stories or,
Totally. Yeah. The only
yeah. So,
other one that came to mind is
yeah.
the one young priest who said, I got you an all-terrain vehicle and I want you to be all-terrain priest. I
Yes.
think I laughed out loud.
Yes. Okay. I'll definitely talk exactly that guy. Well, the funny thing about that was that we'd had a first take kind of, and something was wrong with the camera. So we basically said, hey, can you say that again? And the second time he said it was much more, almost like a little homily he was giving.
Yeah,
But
nice.
it was, it was a little cheesy, but it was a great image. Well, I'll get to that, but just maybe one step along each of the segments, right? Because there were these three. Pope Leo, 20 years in Peru, but not all at once. So Chulucanes, this small remote agricultural community in the Northwest, there from 1985 to 1986. I think, yeah, we talked about the altar boys, right? And that they were, and his goddaughter, right? That he became the godfather of one of the daughters of his altar boys, which was an incredible story. I think it was really moving to hear how he was shaped by this other American who's down there, who's now a
Oh,
servant of God, Father John McNeef, who we learned from one of the altar boys that Father Prevost back then when he was 30 years old, he would tell the other altar boys, there's something different about Father McNeef. Like, just watch, he's going to become a saint one day. And now Pope Leo
Whoa.
is the Pope at a time when Father John McNeef's cause for canonization is underway. So that's a really cool story. I think hearing how how the altar boys, like he I think Pope Leo is one of these people, like, he knows sometimes this is the outcome that I think is best, but I'm not going to use the hammer like we were saying all the time. So at this time, he's got this group of like teenage boys basically, and they want to go to the discotheque, right? They want to go and do
Yeah.
some dancing, maybe drink beer. I don't know for sure what the situation was there. And, there's a couple ways that you can basically prevent them from doing that. You can say, no, you're not going. I'm going to come down hard, and that they might have reason or merit. His approach, maybe a little more sneaky. He said, "Oh, interesting. By the way, I'm going to schedule a mandatory meeting for the altar boys in the youth group, on Saturday evenings at 9 p.m. Right, and you've got to come to that." And so they said, like, we couldn't go out anymore because we had to stay with him, but
Right.
they
Yeah.
wanted to stay with him too, right? He helped create the conditions where they could have that encounter, which, as we know, is like so impactful on so many of them. I think just hearing, like, again, you get like a little sense of this guy's a smooth operator. He knows how to use, canon law or sort of administrative devices to help steer things in the direction that he thinks best, which is a good, I think, skill for a pope.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I think so. That was Chulucanis 1 year there. Then he comes back to the U.S. He actually goes to Rome, finishes his doctorate in canon law briefly in the U.S., and then boom, back to Peru, to Trujillo, which is this, big, it's an archdiocese, a big port city. That was actually his single longest assignment in Peru from 1988 to 1998. So like 11 years. And, he was a pastor. He was the leader of the local Augustinian community. So very important, formative experience for him. And like a couple stories from that really, I mean, probably my favorite part of the whole documentary is when you see in this Augustinian house of formation in Trujillo, a young Augustinian friar was showing us around. They take you into the room where he lived. Pope Leo had lived when he was there. They've kind of turned it into a bit of a museum.
Sure. Yeah.
But on the wall are all these photos from the 80s and 90s when he was there as a leader, but a member of the community. And they are the most humanizing sort of photos. You see him celebrating his birthday. They would get the Augustinian community would get up to all kinds of, they put little hats on him and all this other kind of stuff. There's one where he's sitting in a chair and it's covered in flour, like cooking flour and baking flour. And like, I'm not sure if that's like a Peruvian custom or just, I don't know, an Augustinian thing, but like, and so that spirit that you talked about, right? That this kind of like, exuding this kind of goodness, and even though this deep interior life, but then that's integrated with who he was in the community and who he was when he was engaging with others, and his deep relationship with God, his spirituality wasn't an obstacle to then connecting with people more fully. In fact, it aided him, right? Because the closer you get to God, the more you see things like God, the more you see others, right, as made in the image and likeness of God, as people worthy of like we said with this documentary, not objectifying the Pope and reducing him to serve some kind of goal, but like receiving who he really is. And he, I think, in many ways, throughout his time, did that in Peru. One other story from Trujillo, we kind of also talked to this parish, St. Rita's, that he kind of founded, really, and was the
Hmm.
pastor. And yeah, it was really moving to hear the story of how, they were trying to get the blueprints because they didn't have a church, right? Yeah, a
Uh-huh.
building. So he'd invite people to celebrate in this tent, right? They'd celebrate the sacraments in this tent. And then they had an engineer draw up a blueprint, but they couldn't afford to buy it from the engineer. And
Hmm.
like they needed it to get a permit to start construction, this kind of confusing thing. And yeah, like Pope Leo, this one of the women, Liliana, who was at the time, she was like stressing out. She's like, "What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do?" He's like, "Don't worry, I took it to God in prayer. Like it'll be what will be. Like it'll be
Yeah.
worked out." And of course, like then the engineer maybe got a message from God, but says, "You guys don't need to pay for it. Don't worry." And like so, yeah, like a simplicity, not simplistic, but but a simplicity in his relationships, and not like so many times. I like Luigi Giussani, Father Giussani, the founder of Community Liberation, and he's got this line about like not like he says, reality has never let me down. That's one line. And then another one is he said, don't let your idea of reality, what is it? Like, don't let it get in the way of reality. Right. And so many times we want to impose our ideas on a situation, on, a context. And I think there's like a fear, even as Catholics sometimes, that like, I need to come into this situation and just because like, am I insecure about the truth of the gospel? Right. Like, why can't I, different situations call for different approaches. Right. But I think this being able to listen to what is in front of you and receive it, right, and then respond is something that was a hallmark of Pope Leo's. Yeah. And maybe now I'll get to the story you were talking about, because so basically after that, he leaves Peru in 1998. His big assignment after that, 12 years as the prior general of the Augustinian order worldwide. So traveling around, he finishes that in 2012, comes back to the US, and, is expecting, to, have some assignment back with his province in the Midwest of the US or something like that. And he'd had this run-in with Pope Francis. I don't know if you've heard this story before, but
I hadn't heard
we
that.
were at the
I hadn't heard that he had kind of or they had kind of butted
yeah.
heads a little bit. That was really interesting.
So the story goes that in the mid 2000s, of course, Pope Francis at the time was Cardinal Bergoglio, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, in Buenos Aires, and Pope Leo was just Father Prebos, the prior general of the Augustinians. And there was a priest, an Augustinian in Buenos Aires, who Pope Francis really wanted assigned in a certain place. He wanted him to stay longer in some place. Pope Leo is the leader of the Augustinians at the time, looks at the situation. He says, I understand, your eminence, but like, we actually need him here. And he like moved him. Right. And, the story is that kind of, like Cardinal Bergoglio remembered that. Right. And he's like, oh, that guy kind of defied me a little bit. But when they met each other after Bergoglio is elected as Pope Francis, and he comes to the Augustinian kind of general house in Rome and celebrates mass and has lunch with them. And he tells Father Prevost, he's like, I remember you. I remember that thing back there. He's like, don't get too comfortable here. I have some other assignment for you in mind.
Oh,
And so that was kind of, then of course, a few months later, however long it was, he gets the notice, hey, you're the next bishop of Chiclayo in Peru. Which of course is very interesting because Pope Francis, had a very interesting relationship with Americans and American Catholics. But he recognized that Pope Leo, this was a guy who understood the Latin American context sort of inside and out, had really sort of given himself to it, and received insights from it. He was a gringo, but as so many people say, Pope Leo, in his own words, there's no doubt he's an American, right? And to anyone, I have not traveled as much as he has or anything like that, but like, if you've talked to people who were born in a country and then go somewhere else, even for decades, right? But they lived in a country where they were born for 20 plus years. That's who they are, right? And you're always going to be trying to acclimate to a different culture. Even if you're fluent in the language and all these other things, your first way of thinking is going to be as an American, and that's Pope Leo for sure. But he's the first to say how his time in Latin America shaped him, and acknowledges that fully and clearly when he was elected Pope. That was the group, the message, the people he reached out to from the balcony. So Chiclayo, he becomes the bishop of Chiclayo. Couple stories there. One, this we hadn't been reported by anyone at all. Something we discovered that I think was, again, captures how much he identified himself as a Peruvian. The night before he was ordained a bishop, so this is 2014, December 12th, Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe. So the night before that, he spent the night in prayer. Makes sense. You're about to become a bishop. But it wasn't at the cathedral in Chiclayo. He drove about 30 miles outside of town to this kind of a like very half-forgotten, dusty town called Sanya. And what was in Sanya? What was he doing there? There's a relic, a large leg fragment of a saint called Saint Torribius of Mogrovejo, who I don't know about you, Matt, but I had no idea. I'm like, I guess I've seen this guy, and
I
maybe,
had heard of him. I
yeah,
thought he was a kid, I think, because I maybe mixed him up with is it Saint Tarsicius? Saint Tarcisio was like a Roman
yeah.
child. So I think
Okay,
I
that
assumed that was who it was. So I didn't know who he actually was. Anyway, suffice it to say, yeah.
Well, yeah, this Saint Toribia, you're like, I don't even, what kind of a weird name is that? Like, I have no idea even when he lived or where he lived or whatever. But Pope Leo goes to pray before a relic of this guy. Why? Because Saint Turibius, or as they say down there, Santo Toribio, he was a missionary bishop in Peru, just like Pope Leo. He was
Mm.
born in Spain in the 1500s. This is crazy, actually. He was a lay canon lawyer. And he was a lay canon lawyer, and the Archbishop of Lima at the time had died. And so they needed to find an appointment. And this is one other thing I learned. I didn't just learn about Pope Leo, but about Peru and its significance in world history and all this other stuff. After Mexico, Peru was really the capital of the Spanish Empire in the New World. Lima, and it's crazy because the ships came from the Atlantic Ocean. They came to Panama. They unloaded the cargo, people, slaves, and stuff like that sometimes too, and crossed the peninsula to the other side of Panama in the Pacific Ocean, where they built a whole new fleet and then went down to Peru because Peru had a ton of silver. Peru had a ton of silver. So it's like that we were going to set up shop here. Not only did they have a ton of silver, it had the Inca Empire, who once you depose of them, you have this infrastructure, right? And a system of taxation, all this other kind of stuff that the Spanish kind of absorbed, like kind of appropriated. But the point being is that this was a vital part of the Spanish Empire and for the church too, right? This new world, new people, new converts. Toribio, King Philip II says, this is the guy we need to send because this is a really difficult assignment. We need someone who not only knows the law of the church, but has integrity, right? And, is going to kind of bring order to that part of the world. Talks to the Pope at the time. I don't know. I know you're the Pope trivia guy. I can't think off the top of my head who the Pope is at the time, but they
What
say,
year
okay,
was
let's
it?
get, it was like 1560-ish.
It was like one of the infamous Renaissance popes. I wonder if it's like Paul the Third or something. I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna
Yeah.
try to guess. Either like Paul the Third or maybe Alexander the Sixth.
Might have, yeah, it could have been, but I mean, maybe, I don't know if that, hopefully that doesn't take away from the legacy of Santo Toribio, but they basically say, okay, Santo Toribio, you're a layman. Guess what? You're being ordained, consecrated a bishop, and we're sending you across the world. So he comes and he was really, I mean, learning about Santo Toribio itself it's like a side quest of this Pope Leo thing, but it was an incredible, I'm so grateful I learned about him and have, like a little devotion to him now. Like he, he shows up and he was just a shepherd to the people. He translated the catechism. He learned Quechua and other indigenous languages and translated the catechism into these
The,
languages.
the
I mean, I guess he probably had a lot of help, right? Like, I mean, there were
sure,
probably other
sure,
people
sure,
there
sure.
who knew the language, but like he was just like, no, we want the people, yeah, they're going to learn Spanish, but like we want them to know the faith, right? And he defended, at the time there's a lot of exploitation of indigenous people by Spanish merchants, Spanish governors, stuff like that. He kind of stepped in as great champion of the rights of the indigenous people there. He made 3 journeys across the archdiocese, which at the time was humongous.
Yeah,
He made
wow.
3 journeys on foot or by donkey, right? And so this is the man, he's known as the Apostle of Peru. This is the man who Pope Leo goes to the night before he becomes a Peruvian bishop to ask for his intercession, to ask for his aid through prayer, right? And to, in many ways, model his own ministry after. So, like, I mean, Pope Leo, he embraced the devotions of the local people. He embraced the local saints, and in many ways, like, those elements of Santo Toribio's time as bishop in Peru, Pope Leo emulated them in his service. And so the example you gave before, this 4x4 white pickup truck, right? Pope Leo didn't necessarily, walk to every corner of his diocese in Chiclayo, but when he got there soon after, he said, "Hey, I need a pickup truck. I need like a serious vehicle, right? That is capable of not just getting around Chiclayo, but getting around to the far reaches of this diocese, which included parts in the Andean highlands, right? So you start to get up into the mountains. Roads can be pretty treacherous." And this has been reported before too, but Pope Leo loves cars. He loves
I was just
driving in
gonna say
cars.
there was a probably small part of it's like I want one that's fun to drive too. I need
Yeah,
one
like
that
that could yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah. I've seen other reporting that like some Peruvians saying like, oh, he loved to drive like a madman. Like he had a need for speed, right?
Okay, the friends, the Minnesota friends that when he was in Chicago maybe or wherever the Augustinian house was that he was for a short time in like the
Yeah.
late 80s in between stints in Peru.
Hmm.
The friends came and visited him and I think they had young kids at the time. And so he said, "Oh, we'll go out to dinner. we have we have two cars. We have this it was like a really nice I don't know if it was a convertible, but it was like a much nicer, pretty cool car to drive that probably got donated, or a Chevelle, which was like the Toyota Camry of the age, it sounded
Hmm.
like. And John, his friend, said, "Yeah, we were looking at a Chevelle that we might buy as a family car." So we said, "Oh, let's take the Chevelle." And
Yeah.
he's like, and I could see his face just sunk because he really wanted to go
He wanted
drive the fun car.
Yeah, there were other yeah, they in Chulucanas, one of the altar boys said, yeah, he really I think he said if he wasn't a priest, I think he would have been a race car driver. And he not only liked to drive them, but he knew how to fix them. And we also heard that he he wouldn't always need to drive. He wouldn't always be like, I have to drive, right? But he liked long trips and he liked using them as time to talk to people, to get to know them. But he also saw, this. I do. It is the all terrain. He chose an all terrain vehicle because we need to be all terrain priests. It's a little cheesy, but yeah, this is a guy who really believed in going out to the people. One story we heard was he was going to the first mass of a newly ordained priest. This 2023, far flung part of the Diocese of Chiclayo, and there was a river, La Leche River, and it had overflown, right? And so there was just, traffic was not getting across, this, I don't know if a bridge collapsed or something like that, but it was like you couldn't get across it. And he's like, I know people are waiting for me. I know this new priest is waiting for me. It's his first mass. And so they get up there, they look around, and someone's like, I think this vehicle can do it. He said, let's do it. And he drives out, crosses the river, shows up to this mass. And I think that, we're seeing that already a little bit with his, the beautiful visit to Africa, that to these different countries in Africa and the closeness he has to the people here. I love how I think Pope Leo balances. It's like an incarnational. It's like the vertical and the horizontal. Like he is so close to the people, right? Like there's some of these shots of him visiting prisoners in might have been Equatorial Guinea, but like so close to the people while still maintaining his office. And I don't say that as like some kind of like I love hierarchy, like just for its own sake or something like that. But that's what people need. The Pope is a mediator. He's the vicar of Christ, right? So someone who in his humanness comes to us and is close to us, but at the same time never diminishes his office, right? Because we're looking for that transcendence, right? We're looking for that connection to God ultimately. So that, yeah, I think that the 4x4 was sort of an indicator. It was cool to ride in it and do an interview in
Mhm.
there and give, like kind of give a sense of what it was like for the viewers as well.
It looked really cool. I love all those stories about him. That was another one that I think was really moving to reflect on was him sitting there and saying, "Okay, this is annoying." The very Chestertonian, like it's an inconvenience, but I'm going to
Yeah.
treat it as an adventure, and also I have a duty to get there for this priest. So I'm going to go first, and you guys follow after me, which I think
Yeah.
is so beautiful. It's the essence of spiritual father. It's the essence of real fatherhood.
Mm.
And I incarnational fatherhood, spiritual fatherhood is real fatherhood, obviously, but it's
Hmm.
that's just 101 to the calling, whether you're a biological dad, a priest, a bishop, and ultimately the Pope. So I think I think all those things. I love that you picked all three of those stories. That it's really illustrative of not who knows what kind of problems he's going to face over hopefully 30 years as the Pope, God willing. Um, but it's kind of a roadmap of here's how we can probably rely pretty confidently on how he's going to handle these things. And I've always taken comfort just on the boring administrative stuff that it seems like him and Pope Francis maybe spiritually were similar, but Pope Francis just didn't have the administrative natural ability and the temperament too from the stories you'd hear, which again, everybody's got their strengths. I don't fault him for it. But it seems like Pope Leo has both of those things,
Yeah.
which I mean, if Pope Francis's legacy is bringing the world Cardinal Robert Prevost, like creating the situation for the election of his successor, who he, maybe again, 200 years from now, they'll say, oh, Pope Francis, he could feel that this was his weakness. And so he
He picked
prophetically,
this guy, yeah, and it was, yeah, he
prophetically,
orchestrated the whole thing, and yeah.
yeah, on his deathbed, choose
Well,
Prevost. No, I don't know.
yes. I mean, well, there's no doubt that like he saw something in Prevost, right? I mean, he made him a bishop, like we talked about, but then he, even before he was the prefect of the dicastery of bishops, he was a member of the dicastery of bishops,
Right.
and then he was brought to Rome as the prefect, and then made a cardinal. And I think Pope Francis's first document that he wrote in its entirety, Evangelii Gaudium,
Yeah. Hmm.
in 2013, missionary discipleship. That's where he introduced this central idea, that I think is how he saw what being a Christian is about. Always a missionary and always a disciple, right? If you're a disciple and you're following Christ, you need to go out, right? You need to bring the gospel out, and you can't bring anything out if you're not staying with Christ, right, and receiving from Him. I think like Pope Leo, like missionary disciple, is like a fantastic description of who he is and how he's led. And I think Francis saw some of that in him, right? And whatever, no grand scheme or something like that. Like it's just like, this is the kind of guy that I want as a bishop, and then I want like helping decide who become bishops.
Hmm.
And I think you're right. Like he brings obviously a sort of skill set and disposition that is definitely different than Francis. But I think and ironically, Francis sort of introduced synodality to the church, right? I would say he wasn't always the most synodal of leader. I think that's kind of a fair thing to say. And but Pope Leo like is a very like good listener who takes things in, then makes the decision, right, as the leader, as the Pope. And so yeah, that's maybe the kind of continuity and differences between some of them that we're seeing being borne out.
It's just occurring to me too. I agree with what you said, and it's just occurring to me that one of the major things that always caused a lot of hand wringing in the Twitter sphere, Catholic Online, whatever you want to call it, was the comments you would make about what priests wearing cassocks and more lace, more grace type vibes, and he's like, "Oh, Pope Francis hates on trad priests," blah blah blah. Um,
Hmm.
it's occurring to me that I think what it seems like he was driving at, if all the things you said are true, which I think they are, that Pope Leo is the kind of priest he wants to be a priest, the kind of priest he wants to have become a bishop and choose bishops. Pope Leo, I love that he seems to just go to the papal closet and say, nobody's worn this in a while. I'm gonna wear this today because it's really cool. He does that, but then he goes to Africa and like as a missionary, served in Peru in all these profound ways. That he's a priest who serves the poor and is intelligent and can make an intellectual defense of the Christological heresies, all these sorts of things, right? Which is the total package. As far as the elements that are there, it seems like that probably was what Pope Francis was driving at, even if he maybe was not um, super elegant in the way that he presented it all the time. I don't know.
Well, and it underscores that you can be a missionary disciple and uh you know do some Gregorian chant, right? Like I mean, because Pope Leo, like it's a both end, it's not an either or. Like he certainly, I think in some ways has leaned into the reverence of his office, right? We're seeing that liturgically in a lot of different ways, and that's not opposed to listening and loving people. Like I mean, my own parish in South Bend, Mishawaka, Indiana, actually, it's one of those unicorn Novus Ordo, ad orientem Novus Ordo. The priest sometimes likes to wear a beretta and stuff like that, but the priest is also like a wildly, incredibly pastoral man. And I think it's a similar kind of thing with Leo. Like you know, like all these things are meant to be in service of the gospel and worshiping God. And like when one of them becomes disconnected and on its own, right? Like we want to bring it back into integrity. And I think that's what he's doing. I see as our Pope right now.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. I don't know where I heard it, but somebody once described that all the heresies were overemphasizing one area and diminishing the other, as if
Hmm.
there's like a fear. So I think of all the wackiness of the last 50 years. The problems of the ultra social justicey parishes was that they served the poor really well, but they let the theology and the right worship slip as though it didn't matter as much. And the same with the opposite, with the SSPX is a great example. I'm sure there's many good pastoral SSPX priests, but the institution has placed so much emphasis on the liturgy and this idea of right worship, which is admirable, that they've completely forgotten the humble, obedient necessity of humble obedience. You see what I'm driving at? It's like it's like all of the heresies that the
Yes.
church has
Yeah.
refuted, that there needs to
Hmm.
be the balance. Otherwise, you fall off of either side.
Yeah. If you take one element of the whole and make it the end all be all, like things get out of whack. And I mean, the reality is, we use the word mystery a lot, right? Mysterion. It doesn't mean that the thing is not intelligible. It means it's inexhaustible. And so, like, the faith is, the faith is true. Like everything's true, right? But it's like, if you sort of rip something out of the whole, right? Like, and kind of, yeah, I think it can lead to ideology, I think is really kind of the word that I would use to describe it.
Mhm. Yeah. It's really interesting. Yeah, there's so much to chew on there. Well, all of it, I know we've gone a little bit over what we even planned, so I appreciate the additional conversation. But Pope Leo's Peru is the documentary.
Yes.
Outstanding. Yeah, so many great nuggets in there. So the last question, if you still have time, who are your three favorite popes and why? There's no
Three.
no rules. It can be anybody.
3 out of 200, 260 something, or I don't know.
Right.
I'm not a pope. I'm not a papal history buff. I should get my friend Josh McManaway, who teaches at Notre Dame. He'd be a great guest for you. He
Oh,
teaches
he's
at
on my list.
Corson.
I need to reach back
Yeah, yeah,
out to
yeah.
him.
He
Yeah.
he would give some great answers to this. But I guess how I'll go. The first one that comes to mind is Pope Benedict XVI. I love Pope Benedict. I mean, it's probably shaped as much by Joseph Ratzinger as Benedict the 16th. I mean, I think you can't read everything. And I think it's not a bad approach when you're coming into theology to pick a thinker and sort of like follow their thread, like into the mystery, like we were talking about, but then don't hold on to them ideologically, like I was saying, right? But use them as a sort of like entryway into the mystery. And like, Benedict the 16th is encyclical, certainly, and his theological writing as Joseph Ratzinger was extremely informative of me. It's all about love. It's about the love of Christ. Like the guy was completely um, miscast or misdescribed by far too many people as some stiff, cold German. He was all about love. I love him dearly. And another pope, topical, Leo the 13th. How can you
Ew,
not love Leo
yes,
the
great.
13th?
Yeah. This is
Obviously
fitting.
our
This
own.
is fitting that we're recording, and I'll have this released by the time the encyclical comes out
Yeah,
on Monday.
absolutely. Yeah, like that, inaugurates this sort of intentional reflection upon social conditions, applying the church's teaching to them. That our own Pope Leo the 14th, is going to continue with the release of his encyclical on Monday. But yeah, I mean, I love Catholic social teaching. I think Catholic social teaching was a gateway for me. I was, born and raised Catholic, but like the deepening of my faith, I think Catholic social teaching played a role in that. And that tradition was in many ways kicked off by Leo the 13th. So give a shout out to him. Another Pope. I think we just had the feast day of one a couple days ago. Is it John the First? Was he?
First,
No, he's not my favorite. I'll just go with Peter. Let me just go with Peter.
I might. Hey, that works. Peter's one of my favorites. Pope St. John the
Yeah,
First. Yeah, I mean, he was a saint. Did I
he
miss it?
died in captivity. The last
Uh,
martyred pope. The last martyred pope. I think he died in captivity. Like he was basically a political prisoner of the Roman Empire in some way, and was kind of set aside. Conditions were
Yeah.
bad and he died. So he's considered a martyr, but I don't
May
know enough
18th.
about it. I'm just going to go with Peter.
It was 2 days ago. Great. And it
Exactly. Exactly.
oh my gosh, it was how did I miss this? Gosh, you're embarrassing me. No, I'm just kidding. It was the 1500th anniversary of his death
Oh,
was this year.
wow.
He died in
Wow. Okay.
526 on May 18th.
So
How
we'll give him
about
a
that?
shout out. We'll give him a shout out. I don't know
Yeah.
enough about him, but I'll go with the OG, Peter.
All right.
Peter, why do you love him? Why does one love him? I mean, because he's this sort of flawed man who Christ chose, who's bold nonetheless. And if the sort of legends are true, even the Quo Vadis quote and that story of Peter leaving, and that's just a beautiful witness to us, right? That we might go astray, or we might not always be as fervent as we should. We might, want to abandon ship or something like that. But Christ is always not only there to forgive us, but with his grace aid us. And so Peter, I think, is a great model for the Christian life. So
Yeah.
those are my guys.
All right. Hey, that's pretty good. Benedict XVI. Oh my gosh, Leo XIII. There we go. St. Peter with an honorable mention to Pope St. John I. Pray for us
Yeah.
1500 years ago. All right. Well,
Yeah,
Jonathan,
not the most original, but that I'm a basic guy. So what
you
can I
know
say?
what? It's the most. It's an original combination. We could put it that way because I don't think anybody's picked those
Nice.
three.
Nice.
All right. Well, yeah. Thanks again for being on the show. This was amazing.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Real pleasure.
Yeah. Where can people find you? Find your work? Follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. ncregister.com. That's the homepage of the National Catholic Register. Good place to come and see all the coverage we have. You mentioned, YouTube is a place to find Pope Leo's Peru, this hour-long special documentary we have on our Pope's time in that South American country. And then I'm on Twitter, for better or for worse. I'm on X, at JL Liedl is my handle or whatnot, but I probably shouldn't be on it, but it's fun sometimes.
Has
So
that been said by every person who's on Twitter? Do you think?
I probably shouldn't be on it so
Probably.
much. Well, they should be. I mean, some might use it well. It's just, I mean, we could get into it, and I'm sure Leo is going to talk about technology in his encyclical, but like this stuff is just not designed to be used well. Like it overpowers our native capacities. Like its force is just like the scale of it and the way it operates on our brain is like it's not just like I'm addicted to reading my book or something like that, right? Like you don't experience the same thing because there's less of the sort of going lower on the brainstem. But all things, not all. I mean, it can be used moderately. So the Pope's on it, so I'm on it too.
That's true. Maybe last question. Do you think Pope Leo is lurking on all of us and keeping tabs in a certain sense?
I don't know. I don't think he has a burner account, like or an alt. I don't think he has an alt.
How hilarious would that be?
That'd be wild. Like I think he gave that up when he took the office, right? Like obviously deleted his whole old account on Twitter. I don't know. Maybe someone sends him a link or something. He checks out something someone said. I don't know if he himself has like a secret account that he's keeping tabs on. Either way, the Lord is watching, and so we should conduct ourselves accordingly.
Yes, indeed. I'm not even going to say what I was going to say. I was going to say at least we know he has a smartphone because he still plays Words with Friends and Wordle. But
Wordle, yeah.
No, your last word is much better. The Lord is watching, so let that be the rule. All right, Jonathan. Well, great to talk to you. Thanks again for being on. Pope Leo's Peru is a documentary, so check it out. I'll have it all linked in the description. We'll catch you guys next time.
Great. Thanks for having me.